It looks and sounds like an election.
Ours is not a party of entitlement. We're not in Ottawa because we think we're owed or for what we can get.
But will there be one?
Everybody wants to say, I'm pushing for an election tomorrow morning. I'm not.
On News in Review today, Parliament and the election question. Hello, I'm Michael Serapio. Last December, Stephen Harper and his Conservatives held their annual Christmas party, and the Prime Minister was in a good mood. Not only did he rally the party faithful, he sang for them. Sweet Caroline, the good times never seem. Harper had a lot to be happy about. His party was about to celebrate 5 years in power, and he was about to become the 11th longest-serving Prime Minister in Canadian history, but it's a minority government. His Conservatives have more seats than any of the other parties, 143, more than the Liberals with 77, the Bloc Québécois with 47, and the NDP with 36. But the other parties combined have more seats than the Conservatives, and if they voted together, they could bring down the government almost any time they wanted. So with polls showing the Conservatives ahead, stories began to circulate that Harper wanted a spring election so he could get a parliamentary majority. In an interview with the CBC's Peter Mansbridge, the Prime Minister denied that he wanted an election.
Do we have an election this year, do you think? What is your gut?
My gut tells me I don't know. It's 50-50. We take the threats from the opposition very seriously. I don't think it's in the country's interests. I don't think it makes any sense to have one right now. But if we're forced into one, we'll be ready.
But a few days later, his party launched attack ads against his opponents. Liberal leader Michael Ignatieff.
Ignatieff, he didn't come back for you.
The leader of the New Democratic Party, Jack Layton.
They say ambition can be blind. Just ask the NDP's Jack Layton.
And Bloc Québécois leader Gilles Duceppe.
En effet, le Bloc a voté contre la création de milliers d'emplois en région.
Harper accused the three leaders of wanting to form a coalition against him, and when in late January he celebrated his 5-year anniversary, it began to look like the beginning of an election campaign. Here's the CBC's Hannah Thibodeau.
The Harpers gathered on stage for the family photo op. The teleprompter was set up, screens played ads and photos of Harper and his team. The Conservative faithful had their signs and T-shirts, and the party even brought in a specialized camera typically used to record sports or concerts. It had all the makings of a campaign event. While today was a day to reflect back on Stephen Harper's 5 years in power, there was also some good old-fashioned election-style rhetoric.
Ours is not a party of entitlement. We're not in Ottawa because we think we're owed or for what we can get.
The unofficial campaign looked a little bit different earlier this week, with the Conservatives launching a series of ads attacking the opposition leaders.
Jack Layton, so desperate for power. Michael Ignatieff is back in Canada, but can we trust him?
The Liberals responded with their own, attacking Harper's policies.
Is this your Canada or Harper's?
The dirty little secret is that attack ads are like cod liver oil. They taste bad, but they work.
This media analyst says these ads have a specific purpose.
A part of this is, I would call it pre-positioning, because it's getting ready just in case, and it's reminding the base why we're in this fight and what's at stake in it.
So Brad, let's start maybe with what's new about the room and how you think it's going to help you in the next election.
Well, what you're in right now, we're at the heart of the next federal election campaign.
The NDP was also preparing for a fight. They gave reporters a tour of their new election war room, and their leader said if the government's budget in March triggered an election, they would be ready.
Look, we're ready for an election. We're more ready than we've ever been.
But Layton said that would depend on what's in the budget.
It really is in the hands of Mr. Harper here. Is he going to work with the other parties? Is he going to say, all right, what are your ideas for the budget? Let's try to incorporate them.
Liberal leader Michael Ignatieff also said it was up to the Conservatives to decide.
We will reserve our ultimate decision on the budget until we see it.
And denied he wanted an election.
Everybody wants to say, I'm pushing for an election tomorrow morning. I'm not. What I'm pushing for is to make sure that when we have an election, Canadians know what the heck this election is about.
But what about the voters? How did they feel about what was going on? And were they even paying attention? The CBC's Red Sharon hit the road to find out.
If you're a federal politician, do you believe these people?
No, not really.
You may find this hard to hear. Politics.
I hate politics.
But this is what people are saying. Do you pay any attention to federal politics? No. As surveys go, it's hardly scientific, but we didn't pick and choose the answers either. The Forks in Winnipeg has always been a meeting place.
Hi there. Hi.
And people will talk politics if you force them.
How are you? Come out and talk to me for a minute.
Even when they are engaged, like businesswoman Tobitha Langan, they don't like what they see.
Politics as it is in Parliament, based on its adversarial approach, is outdated.
Can anything be done about it?
How old are you? 21.
Talk to the future, the young.
Show me something in a nice red. Not that I'm being political or anything. Just like some of those guys in Ottawa, you got to kind of brush the dust off of it.
Scott McCormick pretty much thinks it's hopeless.
We're not living in like a democracy. We're living in a commercial, or a society that's based off commercialism.
Lil Goosen is 22.
So do you pay attention to Parliament?
No, not really.
Do you know who your member of Parliament is?
No.
Lil says in this world of instant and seemingly constant communication, no one is talking to her.
Do you care?
I do care. I feel like I should care, but nobody gives me a reason to care.
When I wander into a nest of seniors, Gren Winslow decides to challenge the seemingly cynical reporter.
So how did it get broken?
I don't know that it's broken. People just aren't interested. Maybe it's because they're doing a good job.
That's a good one. You can't even say that with a straight face.
How engaged is Gren Winslow? Really?
So you pay attention to Parliament?
Well, sure, I read the paper.
Do you know who your member of Parliament is?
Who is our member of Parliament?
He has to ask the boss. And the boss, wife Wendy, isn't pulling any punches.
Do you think people trust politicians anymore?
No. No, not unless no, not in general.
No. That's a sad thing, isn't it? Why is it? Do people just bicker?
They lie?
Not everybody blames politicians. Ron Lebke blames a lazy electorate, too focused on individual desire to think of the common good.
It's unfortunate, and I think it's to the detriment of our society and to the detriment of the democratic process.
And I did find two gentlemen who had this to say about our members in Ottawa.
They'll work for the ordinary peoples, the downtrodden peoples.
But it turns out they're students from India and are just here to study and have lunch.
Your lunch looks good.
I'm gonna try some?
No.
The last word goes to Tobitha, the woman with dessert. She says if only Parliament could dish up something as sweet as her cinnamon buns.
They all need to do what every kindergarten knows. You cooperate and you work together. We expect it. Everybody, everywhere else, we expect that in society. And from our top leaders, they think we are happy that they bicker like kids.
Ouch, that's gotta hurt. Cinnamon bun, anyone? They're sticky. Red Sharon, CBC News, Winnipeg.
If the budget is defeated and there is an election, the biggest campaign issue is expected to be the state of the economy. Now, Canada survived the last recession better than most countries, but the country now has a huge $50 billion deficit. And the government's plans to cut corporate taxes in the next budget are controversial. Finance Minister Jim Flaherty says the tax cut would be good for the economy.
We're going to reduce taxes consistently over a period of time in Canada to encourage investment and the creation of jobs.
But the Liberals don't agree.
You can cut corporate tax when you're in a surplus. Cutting it at a deficit adds to Canada's financial woes, and we think the way to create jobs is invest in post-secondary education and help small and medium enterprises to become more competitive.
And the NDP said it was against tax breaks for big business.
They don't create jobs now when we need them. Infrastructure investment creates jobs 6 times more effectively than corporate tax cuts.
Another controversial proposal is the government's plan to spend about $3 billion building new prisons and about $20 billion on new fighter jets for the Air Force. But none of these controversies seem to hurt the Harper government. In late February, polls showed the Conservatives pulling ahead of their opponents and closing in on a majority. And then scandal struck. A government minister, Bev Oda, was accused of lying about cutting off funding to an aid group called Kairos. And as the CBC's Terry Malevsky reports, it set off a firestorm in Parliament.
The decision to provide funding was mine, or to not provide funding was mine.
That was just a slip of the tongue, but maybe a Freudian one. Minister Bev Oda is in hot water because of this memo, signed by the president of CEDA and the minister. It recommends approval of $7 million for Kairos, but someone wrote in the word not, making it appear to say the opposite.
We all know.
Problem. Margaret Biggs, the president of CEDA, testified the not was not there when she signed. So someone altered the memo later, but the minister claimed ignorance.
You're the one that wrote the not.
I did not say I was the one that wrote the not.
Well, who did that?
I do not know.
You don't know.
I do not know.
All that was clear was that the government tried to make bureaucrats carry the can for its own decision.
Any reasonable person confronted with what appears to have transpired would necessarily be extremely concerned, if not shocked.
Last week, the Speaker said this looks very bad, and today the opposition was blunter.
The minister defunded Kairos.
That's right.
She tried to blame it on officials.
That's right.
Then she misled the House, and then she got caught.
This time, the minister admitted she had the memo altered.
The funding decision was mine. The not was inserted at my direction.
So she changed her story, but it didn't help.
Well, when you have someone doctoring a document, that's fraud. So I'll leave it up to others to tell us what the implications of that are.
The Prime Minister refused to fire Oda and took quite a beating in the media. But he did get some good news. In late February, the NDP announced it would not bring down the government on the issue of corporate tax cuts, leaving Canadians to wonder whether an election would be held later rather than sooner. And that's News in Review. Don't forget to check out our webpage at newsinreview.cbclearning.ca. I'm Michael Serapio. Thanks for watching. It began with street protests.
We'll not go home until this regime is over.
There were violent clashes, and it ended with a giant street party. On News in Review today, Egypt and the Days of Anger. Hello, I'm Michael Serapio. It's a revolt that has shaken the Middle East and the world, but it began with a tragic incident in a small town in the North African country of Tunisia. A young man named Mohamed Bouazizi was stopped by police from selling fruit in a marketplace. Now, Bouazizi had been bullied and beaten by police many times before, but one day last December, when police knocked over his cart, slapped him and spat at him, he finally snapped. In protest, he poured gasoline over himself and set himself on fire. Bouazizi died of his burns 18 days later, but by then, his story had set his country aflame. Poor people he had given free fruit to started protesting, and they were joined by the country's youth. They were angry at the country's high unemployment rate, the lack of political freedom, and the corrupt regime of President Ben Ali, and that anger exploded into the streets. The regime's security forces replied with tear gas and bullets. Dozens of protesters were killed, hundreds of others were injured, but the protests continued. And after 23 years in power, President Ben Ali was forced to flee the country. Those pictures sent a shockwave through the Middle East, where many Arab countries are ruled by old and despotic presidents like Ben Ali. Countries like Egypt, where President Hosni Mubarak had been in power for 30 years, and where in mid-January, protesters took to the streets to demand he step down. Clashes broke out in several Egyptian cities. Riot police tried to quell the protests, but as the CBC's Margaret Evans reported, they only grew bigger.
Egypt is a country on the brink. The security forces here today clearly determined not to let the protests spread. Riot police bringing out water cannons and rubber bullets in cities across the country: Cairo, Alexandria, and Suez. More than 500 people have been jailed over the past 2 days alone, and the internet sites telling people where to gather are slowly being shut down, only to pop up again as the nation, indeed the whole of the Arab world, watches to see if the Tunisian revolution will spread to one of the Middle East's most enduring dictatorships. The Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak has now been in power for some 30 years and is preparing, according to many observers, to hand over control to his son Gamal, a potential scenario already the cause of much unrest here. There have been an unprecedented number of protests and public sector strikes in Egypt over the past 2 years. People angry over unemployment, rising prices, and a steady drain of Egypt's talent to other countries. Opposition to the